Welcome, everyone. It's always a major highlight and a schus to hear from Hagun Rav Usher Weiss, and this will be our Seder L'derech. I know people have had plenty of Seder here, but this will be a final highlight, and he'll be addressing us on the COVID pandemic. I ask Rav Weiss to address us.
I'm very sorry, but I won't be addressing you on the COVID pandemic because I wasn't aware that we are going to speak about historical events. But on the plan that was put forward, I was asked to address a question, where did we go wrong? So on one hand, it is not the halachic sugya. Where did we go wrong on the COVID pandemic is not the halachic discussion. And this is my farewell shir. I am leaving shortly after today's shir, and we are all leaving noon. And Chazal teaches anifta mechaveiro yalye poter hemeno elo metoch dvar halacha. So I do want to give somewhat of a brief halachic discussion before making some additional comments. So in the time of the COVID pandemic, many developed a mistrust of the medical establishment in general, of conventional remedies and approaches, particularly, and they opted for many alternative ideas, cures. So I briefly want to discuss how halacha relates to alternative medicine, and that is a broad, general discussion, not necessarily related to COVID, but related to COVID as well. So the famous Gemara in Bava Kama Pei Hayomid Beis, the parsha we read this Shabbos, Rak Shifto Yiten Verapo Yirape. And the Gemara in Bava Kama says, Mekan Shinitna Reshut Lerofe Lerapot. It is from this pasuk that we learn that doctors have the right to treat patients, that it is a legitimate practice. My kamash malan, what is that kind of coming to teach us, and why would we think that doctors have no place in our communities, and we do not turn to doctors for treating our ill? There are three fundamental Rambans in three different of his amazing Sforim, in which the Ramban deals with his drosha, Verapo Yerape. Torah Sa'odam, one of the most important Sforim that the Ramban wrote, he offers two different interpretations. One might think we believe in Hashgacha Protis, and if a person is ill, obviously it is punishment, or some other reason, it is a heavenly decree. Who are we to fight the Kodesh Baruch Hu and to challenge him? If he says A, could we say B? And if he strikes, could we take the privilege of trying to cure? Are we supposed to fix what a Kodesh Baruch Hu broke? So the Torah comes to teach us, regardless of our emunah in betochen, in divine providence and in Hashgacha Protis, we are to treat illness b'derech hishtadlus, just like we make hishtadlus in any other human endeavor, whether it's parnasa or any other area. So the revusa, the chiddush is, yes, that it is a legitimate practice. And we do not say, we believe everything is from Hashem, and therefore, ani machatzti va'arapeh. And we should leave it all up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You should daven, you should pray that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should take your illness away. So the revusa is, it is a legitimate practice. That is one Ramban in Torah Sa'odam. The Ramban of Parshas Bechukoisai, Ramban on the Torah, when the Pasuk promises in Bechukoisai Teilechu, all the blessings in the world, V'hasiroisi machalo mikurbecho, and I will take sickness, I will take suffering, I will take illness away. And then Ramban writes a very powerful line that was quoted by many Gedolim throughout the ages. Ma lerofeh bebeit yirei Hashem. What is a doctor doing in the home of a God-fearing Jew? If HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes us ill, we daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And one of the first brachas we make every day in the morning is Asher Yotzar, Rofeh Kol Basar, Umafli La'asos. And therefore the Ramban says, Kishahoyu Yisrael Rabim Vehem Shleimim Be'eretz Yisrael Lo Yisnahig Inyonam B'derech HaTeva. When we were many Be'eretz HaKodesh, and the vast majority of our people were Davak and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, diligent in their mitzvahs, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will save and salvage and heal, and there will be no need for doctors. Some Achronim interpreted the Ramban as if the Ramban says, if you are a real Yerei Shemaim and you daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you don't need to turn to doctors, and that is a mistake. The Ramban, in his commentary on the Torah, writes about a utopian dream. And he stresses that is only when we were sitting in Eretz Yisrael and we were all Deveikim b'Kodesh Baruch Hu. He just describes a situation that was once in days of yore, and we hope will be again via Moisa Mashiach. But the Ramban, source number 3, Malchamois Hashem, Sanhedrin Yud Zayin Amud Beis, clearly says that when Chazal say Mekan Shenitna Reshut Leroifa Lerapos, it is not only Reshus, it's not only permission, it's a chiyuv. And the chiyuv is not only upon the doctor to treat, it is upon the patient to seek treatment. So in the two svarim in which the Ramban deals with halachic ruling, Torah Sa'odam, and his commentary on Shas, he makes it very clear. There is no other way. If you're ill, you turn to doctors. You daven, goes without saying. You believe that it is all up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but that is the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu made his world. It's a dilemma, seems to be a paradox. Hashgacha Pratis on one hand, and natural hishtadlus on the other. As in any other endeavor, the same in medicine. One of the greatest Talmidim of the Ramban, and perhaps the greatest, was the Rashba. Shuvas Rashba Chelek Aleph Tov Yud Gimel. The Rashba just reiterates what the Ramban says, and he too explains, even though the wording of Chazal Mekan Shenitna Reshut Leroifa Lerapos seems to indicate you have permission, but not beyond that. The Rashba as well says it's not only permission, it is an obligation. And the obligation is upon the doctor to treat and upon the ill to seek treatment and to turn to doctors and to turn to medicine. The Rashba does say there were Yechidas Gila, the giants of yore, like Reb Chanina ben Dosa, who served HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'mala mederach hateva, and they have the right and the privilege l'smoch ala neis. And there are many sources in Shas in which we see that some of the great Tanoim and Ameroim actually did not turn to doctors, only to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But that is irrelevant. It is irrelevant for many years, and in the days of the Rishonim, that is unheard of. Yes, there were Reb Chanina ben Dosa, Choni HaMa'agel, and some others we find in Chazal, Reb Yankov Breder of Acher Bayankov and Mesechet Kiddushin. Those were exceptions. And those were the giants of yore, those that were 2,000 years ago. But throughout the ages, that is no longer relevant. And all these Gedolim make it clear, yes, when you are ill, you need to daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But it is also an obligation, a mitzvah and a chiyuv to try, turn to doctors, and follow their guidance. So the Turei of Yoredei Shin Lamed Vav Siv Kut Nalav does explain, so why do Chazal use a formula, wording, that might be, that actually demands a mistaken interpretation? So why do Chazal say Mekan Shenitne Rishus L'Roi for the rabbis, and why don't Chazal clearly say it's a chiyuv? So the Taz explains, because fundamentally, we need to believe that everything is up to Hashem. He and only He is the one that can give refuah. And to stress that point, the Lashon of Chazal is Nitna Reshut L'Roi for the rabbis, but in all practicality, what is fundamentally a reshus develops into a chayva. Because none of us could say, Zikisi Levavi, and I'm such a great tzaddik, and I'm going to rely only on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So everyone agrees that it's not only a reshus, it is an obligation, it is a mitzvah, it is a chiyuv, and it is a chiyuv upon both sides, the patient to seek refuah, and the roifei, and the doctor to administer medicine. Mogen Avram Shin Chav Ches, Siv Kot Nalef. We quoted the Taz in Yoredei Shin Lamed Vav, and now we're back in Orach Chaim in Hilchos Shabbos. Mogen Avram says, if a patient refuses treatment, not on the basis of pain, of suffering, which we discussed throughout the weekend, but he refuses treatment because he says, I trust HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and I rely on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and I davened, v'hoisot filososh gura befi, like Reb Chanina ben Dosa says in Brochas Lamed Daled, I have the formula, im tfilososh gura befi, I know shetfilosi miskabeles. So the Mogen Avram says if a patient refuses treatment, we need to force him to receive treatment. And in that case, halacha does not recognize patient autonomy. You cannot refuse treatment claiming that you trust HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You have no right to trust HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and this is not derech HaTorah, and therefore we impose treatment on a patient that refuses treatment based on his trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So all the sources I quoted up to this point deal fundamentally with the chiyuv, the obligation to seek treatment by doctors, and the chiyuv upon the doctor to do his best to treat and to heal. What about alternative medicine? There is one source in the Mishnah, Yume Pego Meram Laraf, Mishenashchoi Kelev Shoita. Obviously, it is a dog that has rabies, and rabies is a terrible disease. You cut up that dog, you remove his liver, and you feed the patient from the liver of the dog, and that is a remedy. That is the opinion of Rav Masya ben Chorosh. The Chachamim say, no, that is not permissible. Because the dog is a chayat tumeya, and eating his meat is prohibited. And even though we're dealing with a pikuach nefesh situation, that is not permissible. However, we know that pikuach nefesh, derech kol asurim shebetoyre, overrides machalot asurot. And if that is a cure, why is it not permissible? Rashi writes, even though some doctors would suggest it, it is not a refuah gemura, it's not a total refuah, and therefore it doesn't override an issa dioraisa of machalot asurot. And the kapis tmorim, in his Sefer and Masechet Yoma, the Sefer Yom Kippurim, the Kapis Morim was the Maram ben Chaviv, living 400 years ago. He was the Gadol of Yerushalayim in his time. And he asks, if it's not a refuah gemura, it still would be included in the concept of sufek b'kuach nefesh doiches Shabbos. Is it only a refuah gemura that is doiches Shabbos v'kol asurim shebetayra? If doctors administer it, obviously there is some merit to it. So the Kapis Morim writes that the Ran quotes Rashi, he omits one word, gemura. And the way the Ran quotes Rashi is ein ze refuah. But then what would wonder, if it's not a refuah, then why do doctors administer it? So some doctors sometimes would say, well, this is what the patient wants, and I need to make him happy. I need to give him something. But it would be strange if, according to the Ran, it bears no merit, and it's not even considered a suffix, a refuah in a pikuach nefesh situation. Why do the doctors recommend it? So we quoted Rashi, ein ze refuah gemura. The Ran obviously feels uncomfortable with Rashi, according to the interpretation of the Kapis Morim, Maram ben Chaviv. So he omits the word ein ze refuah. The Meiri comes along and he changes the entire wording of Rashi, and he says, Afal pisha hahamoinim, the masses take it, ein ze refuah. Not afal pisha haroifim suggest, but the people do. So what we learn from the Meiri, what people demand doesn't really mean anything. Doctors wouldn't suggest something that carries no weight and no merit, but you cannot trust the hamoinim. So yes, people believe for some reason that eating from the liver of an infected dog that has rabies would be a remedy, would cure rabies, but ein ze refuah. So it's just interesting to note how the Rishonim analyzed and counted the words, and each wants to express the same idea and the same interpretation by using different language and different words. When the Rambam explains this Mishnah in Peresh HaMishnah LaHarambam, the Rambam writes, Ki ze einoi moyel elo b'derech zgula. It might help, but it's not a natural cure. It is b'derech zgula. וחכמים סוברים כי אין עוברים על המצוות אלא ברפואה לבד. רוצה לומר, דבורים המרפאים בטבע, only things that bring cure and are effective בדרך הטבע, והוא דבר אמיתי הוציאו הדעת והניסיון הקרוב לאמת. So the Rambam demands two criteria, hadat v'hanisayon. It needs to be proven medicine. It needs to be proven, obviously, statistically. V'hadat needs to be logical. It needs to be something we could explain and understand. The only refuah that would override Isurim is the Voram HaMarapim B'teva v'dover amiti hoitziu hadat v'hanisayon hakarov le'emet. אבל להתרפות בדבורים שהם מרפאים בסגולתם אסור, כי כוחם חלוש, אינוי מצד הדעת וניסיונו רחוק, והוא טענה חלושה מן הטועה. So that is the Rambam's interpretation, and the Rambam was one of the greatest physicians, maybe the greatest physician of his era. And that is the way the Rambam explains why a person's life is in immediate danger. He might be dying, definitely a chodesh yesh b'sekona, but we only will be machal Shabbos to treat him in a conventional way. The doctors would recommend something that was proven, and it is based on hadat v'hanisayon, and nothing that is b'derech segula. Is the fundamental principle the difference between natural remedies and segula? Or is it more about, is this proven treatment or not? Is it reliable based on our experience? The Rama, Yoredea Kuf Nun Hey Siv Gimel writes, only refuah yedua or alpi mumche. You only administer medicine if it is known to be effective or a mumche recommends it, which means might be a new treatment, a new procedure, a new medicine that we are not really aware of, but you rely on a roifa mumche. Mogen Avram quotes the Rama, same principle needs to be proven, or we rely on doctors that are competent, that are known, and it must be a refuah b'derech hateva. The Berke Yosef, the Chida, living more than 200 years ago, coming back to Yerushalayim, Ira Kodesh. The Chida lived in Yerushalayim, but he traveled throughout Europe extensively. He was a shadar. He collected money for Aniyei Eretz Yisrael. He actually passed away in Chutz La'aretz, far from home. The Berke Yosef of Simashian Aleph writes that it is known that a great Gadol wrote a kameya on Shabbos to save a person's life. He wrote a kameya, and that is one of Alametes Malachas Shabbos. It is a chorus, and it definitely is not a natural remedy. Totally bederech sgula. And the Chado doesn't write who was that Gadol. Reb Chaim Pelagi, in a Sefer Rufuah V'Chaim, Siman Yud Beis writes, that was the Rashash, one of the greatest Mikubolim, Bala Kabor, going back 400 years. And the Chida, in another one of his Sforim, Sharas HaTshuvas Yosef Chaim Shoal, Chelik Beis Melamed Ches, writes, Kabbalah B'Yodai, that Rabbeinu Peretz, Mebale HaTosfos, wrote a Kameya on Shabbos, and the Rama, Rameir Abulafia, who was the Rebbe of the Ritva, and he has a Kabbalah that these two Rishonim wrote a Kameya on Shabbos, which proves that sometimes we would rely on Sgulas. We believe in Sgulas. There are many Sgulas in Chazal. We are not rationalists to the degree to discredit Sgulas. But it is only those Sgulas that are established by Gedolei Yisrael, and according to the Mesidus that the Chido passes on, there were Gedolim in the days of Bali Atosis going back 900 years, the Rashash going back almost 500 years, that wrote Kameyas on Shabbos, and I assume the Kameyas worked. I do not want to doubt that. So coming back to our discussion, alternative medicine must be taken in a very cautious way. And many times I recommend to cancer patients, especially those that are desperately ill, to try anything, but not at the expense of conventional medicine that was proven to be helpful. Not at the expense of conventional medicine that we could explain and understand the mechanism, how it works, and it was proven statistically to be helpful. And the people that administer this medicine are reliable people, and they bear consequences for wrongdoing. And the big problems with conventional medicine, you don't know who are the charlatans and who are the serious ones, and probably there are serious ones. Most of this stuff was not statistically proven, and many of these remedies, we don't really have a clear explanation how they work. So the formula of the Rambam is only Devorim Shehotziu min Hadat v'Hanisayon. And most of these unconventional alternative medicines are neither based on that or on Nisayon. Nevertheless, people are entitled. They are entitled to try everything. They need to check whether these remedies might have a negative effect on their health, because it shouldn't be taken for granted that everything that is natural is healthy. There are some terrible things in nature Well, snake venom is natural, not very healthy, and even the tzomeach has some very dangerous things. So alternative medicine, I don't want to say is illegitimate, but it should never be taken instead of conventional medicine that was proven. There are many ailments in which conventional medicine doesn't have much to offer, especially at certain stages. And it is legitimate to try other methods as well, but not to make tofa le'ikar and ikar le'tofa. So in the period of the pandemic, I wrote a sefer on Corona, and I mentioned this one of the shiurim I gave. And in the sefer there are not only tshuvas, but also some of the shmusin and talks and letters of chizuk that I wrote in that period, because it was a very challenging period. I think COVID stage 1 brought out the best in us. There was a feeling of kol yisrael arevim zeh lezeh. People cared about one another. We locked ourselves in our homes. We closed shuls. The young, the healthy, the vibrant understood that they must limit their activities to care for the elderly, for the feeble, for the ill. It was a very special atmosphere. And then at some stage, everything fell apart. And our society was torn about and unraveled. And it brought out so much machlokes and so much strife and so much pgia b'kvoda Torah. It was like sheva shnois harav she'eshkichu et sheva shnois hasoiva. And when the shnois harav came, people couldn't even imagine how it was b'shnois hasoiva. And we didn't prepare b'shnois hasoiva because we couldn't really imagine what's coming. So the second stage of COVID brought out the worst in us. So much machlokes and so much pgia b'kvoda Torah. And took time, and we hope that things will come together again. But we're still suffering from the aftermath of what happened to our societies in COVID, not from the medical aspect, more from the social aspect. And one of the, I think, problematic things of the period of COVID was, in many circles in our communities, some rabbonim, some gedolim, that didn't trust the medical establishment, but it caused a total breakdown and a total mistrust in medicine, in doctors, and whatever doctors say and whatever they represent. These insane conspiracy theories, and I really want to say insane because that is the way I see it. And it caused a total breakdown of trust. Trust we always had, since Chazal said, Mekan shenitnu rishus laroifa lerapis. In every segment of society, there are good people and bad people. There are wonderful people and horrible people. No profession is clean from charlatans. But generally speaking, we need to trust medicine, because otherwise we are totally lost. And it goes against Mikan shenitnu rishus laroifa lerapis. So al pi halacha, you turn to your doctor. That means you trust your doctor. Doctors don't know everything. There is so much they don't know. But we know far more than we knew in the past. Ibn Ezra, more than 900 years ago, writes that doctors don't know anything about what's in the body, only what's outside. So Ibn Ezra trusts doctors only treating with a rash, dandruff, cuts, bruises. But how would doctors know what's happening inside the body? That's what Ibn Ezra writes. The father of the Avnei Nezer 150 years ago quotes the Ibn Ezra as if that is halacha l'Moshe Sinai. And that's extremely strange. But even going back 150 years, they didn't know much. We know a great deal more than we ever knew in the past. And there is still so much that we don't know. But there is no other way to be a good Jew and no other way to live, only in the light of Divrei Chazal Mekan Shenitna Rishus LeRoifa L'Rapis. And a Roifa is a qualified Roifa. That was the way it always was. And this total breakdown of trust in major parts of our communities has dramatic and catastrophic consequences. And I know many cancer patients that won't trust doctors. They won't go for radiation. They won't go for chemotherapy. And we still didn't find a cure to cancer. Halavai, Shashem Yazor, this is such a curse. But in many forms of cancer, there was dramatic advance, and forms that once were terminal are defined today as a chronic illness. Many types of cancers. But if you don't follow the rules and you won't take medicine, you're diminishing your chances to live. And it is becoming more and more common in our society. People don't trust doctors. And they go to all kind of charlatans suggesting total nonsense that has not been proven. And I am a bit familiar in the field. To my dismay, my late father passed away from cancer. My wife passed away from cancer, so I am somewhat familiar. And this is a direct result of questioning medicine, doubting medicine, undermining the trust of people, not only in the COVID vaccine, in medicine in general. So a few years ago, we had an outbreak of measles in Yerushalayim and in some places in New York as well, because so many people stopped vaccinating their children for measles. We don't want to go back we were 100 and 200 and 300 years ago. Smallpox wiped out 50% of the population of Europe. Just think what 50% means. Many Gedolei Yisrael died from smallpox, from cholera. I remember polio when I was a young kid. So many people were in wheelchairs, couldn't move their legs. And these diseases didn't go away because someone wrote a Kameya. Vaccines took away these diseases. So planting total mistrust is a terrible mistake, and we need to restore faith in the medical profession and in medicine. And I think that is scars that we still carry from the COVID pandemic. So I don't want to be negative, and I don't want to criticize going back anyone, but these are bad consequences that we are still carrying from the period of COVID. And I think we all need to restore our fundamental trust in medicine and the medical establishment. I want to make a halachic comment. We find in 5 different sources in Shas a concept, Shomer Pisoim Hashem. When do we say Shomer Pisoim Hashem? So there's a big arichas about this sugi in the new Minchas Osher that just came out a few weeks ago out of Torah. I think it's in Parshas Ve'eschana, in the midst of Shmiras Aguf V'Nefesh. And we have the Sefer outside. And I define Shomer Pisoim Hashem. When you follow the rules and you act according to the norm, what doctors say, they might be wrong, and sometimes they are wrong. And yesterday night I said, it is inevitable that we make mistakes. Rabbonim, Poiskim, and doctors. It is part of human nature. And David HaMelech says in Tehillim, Shgiyois mi yavin. We will make mistakes. But if you follow the rules, you are on the safe side and you have siyata d'shmaya. And that is the concept of Shomer Pisoim Hashem. I have a very negative opinion about smoking cigarettes. and it was once one of the first Rabbanim that came out very strongly and publicly. I think it's a Isser to smoke, not a Midas Chasidus. So many times I'm asked, is it an Isser to smoke one cigarette? No. You're not going to die by smoking a cigarette. But experience proves that a young boy that smokes one cigarette will smoke another, and he will become addicted. And being a smoker shortens your life, beyond doubt. And maybe 50 or 60 years ago, we would say, Shomer Pesoim Hashem, but no longer. When the entire world understands and the medical establishment explains that smoking is hazardous to your health, you could no longer say Shomer Pesoim Hashem. But as long as a person follows the rules and he acts according to the norm, follows instructions and guidance of doctors, in as much as they know or don't know, he has this additional level of security that Chazal say, Shomer Pesoim Hashem. But if you go out on your own and you follow the opinions of people that are totally unqualified and unauthorized, you don't have Shomer Pesoim Hashem. So you're always on the safer side, even in Torah Hashkafa and in Halachic Hashkafa, by following the rules, the attitudes, the approaches, the recommendations, the guidance of the medical establishment and of doctors of our communities. One last comment. So once again, I want to thank not only Dr. Friedman on a personal level, but Chemed. I have become aware of the amazing work that Chemed does for the Lakewood community, and not only the Lakewood community. Addressing doctors, I also have become aware of an acute shortage of doctors in Lakewood. Lakewood has become a boom town, and it has grown unbelievably. And every time I visit, it's twice the size, and we're spreading out to Jackson and Toms River, and I still didn't memorize all the other names of the towns around Lakewood. So B'nai Torah are flocking to Lakewood, and the parents of B'nai Torah are moving to Lakewood. We don't have enough doctors in Lakewood, and there's an extreme shortage, and that is a pikuach nefesh. So I don't know what to say. I think Chemed should take up this challenge and try to be more doctors. And I think the community needs to provide an atmosphere in doctors in which doctors will want to come to Lakewood. We need to incentivize doctors to come and provide an atmosphere and be forthcoming, in many areas, education and other areas. So we need more doctors in Lakewood. So anybody listen to me, if you're a doctor anywhere in Brooklyn, in Manhattan, in Queens, in Jersey, come to Lakewood. We need you in Lakewood, and I hope the community will do its utmost to accommodate and to make it pleasant and inviting for doctors to join the wonderful B'nai Torah community of Lakewood. So it was a pleasure to be with you this weekend. It was an amazing experience, and I'm sure that everybody has the same feeling. And I wish you all, especially the medical professionals, Mida Keneged Mida, you're serving the community. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should keep your families fine and healthy and vibrant. And Arichas Yom Vishonim, B'toivo, B'ne'imim, Nachas from your children. And B'korov B'yomeinu, we should be Zoichel Abias Moshiach Tzidkeinu, B'meiru V'yomeinu, Amen.